there is a quiet, heavy ache that comes with realizing the person who was supposed to love you unconditionally simply cannot. It is a specific kind of confusion and emotional exhaustion that leaves you questioning your own reality. You likely spent years wondering what was wrong with you. You analyzed your behavior, your words, and your achievements, hoping to finally unlock their warmth. You tried to be quieter, more successful, more accommodating, believing that if you just got it right this time, the love would finally flow. But the warmth never came. It is deeply painful to look at a parent and feel a profound, unbridgeable emotional distance. It leaves you questioning your own worth, your own right to take up space, and your own fundamental lovability. But I want you to hear this clearly right now. You were never the problem. The inability to love you the way you deserved was never a reflection of your value. It was a reflection of a severe internal limitation. You did not fail to be lovable. They failed to be capable of loving you. When we look at why narcissists struggle to love their own children, we have to look at a fundamental psychological reality. Narcissism is not just about being selfish, arrogant, or difficult to deal with. It is a profound deficit in the ability to see other people as separate, whole human beings, with their own needs, feelings, and autonomy. To a narcissistic parent, a child is not a person to be nurtured, guided, and protected. A child is a tool, a mirror, or an extension of themselves. This dynamic creates an environment where genuine, unconditional love is impossible, because genuine love requires seeing the other person clearly, respecting their boundaries, and prioritizing their well-being. That is exactly what a narcissist cannot do. Their internal world is so focused on self-preservation and ego regulation that there is no room for the selfless, steady act of parenting. One of the primary reasons for this dynamic is that they view their children as extensions of themselves, rather than independent individuals. From the moment you were born, you were not seen as a separate person with your own personality, preferences, or boundaries. You were seen as a reflection of them. If you succeeded, it was because of their superior genetics or parenting. If you failed, it was a direct embarrassment to them. This happens because their sense of self is so fragile and unstable that they must absorb the identities of those closest to them to feel whole. For you, this meant your authentic self was constantly invalidated. Any trait you had that did not align with their idealized image of you was criticized, ignored, or punished. You learned early on that being yourself was unsafe, and that your only value lay in how well you reflected their desired image back to the world. Another deeply impactful reason is that your independence was perceived as a direct threat. As children grow, it is natural and healthy for them to develop their own opinions, make their own choices, and eventually leave the nest. But to a narcissistic parent, a child's independence feels like a profound betrayal. It signals a loss of control. When you started to think for yourself or set a boundary, it was not met with pride or support. It was met with resistance, guilt-tripping, or sudden punishing coldness. Psychologically, this happens because their control over you is what regulates their own anxiety and self-esteem. Your autonomy disrupts their illusion of dominance. As a result, you were likely made to feel guilty for having normal developmental needs. You were taught that wanting space or making your own decisions was an act of hostility, leaving you with a deep-seated fear of asserting your own needs even in adulthood. This leads to a third reason, which is a deeply unsettling one: envy and competition. It is difficult to comprehend, but a narcissistic parent can genuinely envy their own child. If you possessed qualities they lacked, such as natural charm, intelligence, resilience, or the ability to form healthy relationships, it triggered their deep-seated insecurities. Instead of celebrating your strengths, they would subtly undermine them. They might downplay your achievements, make backhanded compliments, or suddenly shift the focus back to themselves whenever you received attention. This behavior stems from a psychological inability to tolerate anyone else shining, even their own offspring. For you, this created a confusing dynamic where your successes were met with subtle sabotage rather than joy. You learned to downplay your own accomplishments to avoid triggering their jealousy, slowly dimming your own light to keep the peace. Furthermore, their love is entirely conditional and transactional. In a healthy parent-child relationship, love is a constant. It does not fluctuate based on performance, mood, or compliance. For a narcissist, affection is a currency used to buy obedience. You were loved only when you were useful, obedient, or making them look good. The moment you expressed a need, disagreed with them, or failed to meet their unrealistic expectations, that affection was instantly withdrawn. This is known as intermittent reinforcement, a powerful psychological mechanism that keeps you constantly striving for approval. Because the reward was occasionally given, you kept trying harder, believing that if you just performed well enough, the love would become permanent. This left you emotionally exhausted, always walking on eggshells and deeply confused about what you had to do to simply be accepted. Equally significant is the fifth reason, which is a profound lack of emotional empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. It is the absolute foundation of parental love. A narcissist lacks this capacity. When you were hurt, scared, or sad, your pain was not met with comfort or validation. It was often met with annoyance, dismissal, or even mockery. If you cried, you were told you were being dramatic. If you were struggling, you were told to toughen up. This happens because your emotions demand an emotional response that they are simply incapable of providing. Furthermore, your pain reminds them of their own inadequacy as a parent, so they reject it to protect their ego. For you, this resulted in profound emotional neglect. You learned that your feelings did not matter, leading to a lifetime of struggling to identify, express, or validate your own emotions, because the first person who should have taught you how to do that was entirely absent. The sixth reason centers around their absolute need for control over your autonomy and your narrative. A narcissist must control not only your actions, but also your perception of reality. This is why gaslighting is so common in these dynamics. If you remembered an event differently than they did, your memory was aggressively challenged. If you brought up a past hurt, you were told it never happened, or that you were too sensitive and imagining things. This control is necessary for them to maintain their false, perfect self-image. They cannot allow you to hold a truth that contradicts their narrative. The impact on you was a severe erosion of your own reality. You began to distrust your own memory, your own perceptions, and your own judgment. You became reliant on their version of reality, which kept you trapped in a cycle of self-doubt and made it incredibly difficult to trust yourself as you grew older. Finally, the seventh reason is their complete inability to take accountability or apologize. In any healthy relationship, mistakes are acknowledged and apologies are offered. This builds trust and allows for repair. A narcissist views any admission of fault as a catastrophic blow to their fragile ego. Therefore, they will never genuinely apologize to you. If they do say the words, "I am sorry," it is usually followed by a justification, a deflection, or a subtle blame shift back onto you. They might say they are sorry you feel that way, rather than sorry for what they actually did. Psychologically, admitting fault requires a level of self-reflection and humility that their defense mechanisms will not allow. For you, this meant that the wounds they inflicted were never acknowledged, let alone healed. You were left carrying the burden of the damage, forced to pretend everything was fine just to maintain a fragile connection, which bred deep resentment and unresolved grief. Recognizing these 7 reasons is not about assigning blame for the sake of anger or holding on to the past. It is about gaining profound clarity. For years, you may have carried the weight of their dysfunction, believing that if you were just better, smarter, quieter, or more compliant, the dynamic would finally change. But now you can see the reality. The dynamic was never about you. It was about their internal architecture, their fragility, and their profound limitations. When you understand that their behavior was a predictable pattern of psychological defense, it begins to loosen the grip their actions have on your self-worth. You can start to step back emotionally. You no longer have to participate in the exhausting dance of trying to prove your worth to someone who is fundamentally incapable of seeing it. This awareness is the first, most crucial step toward reclaiming your mind. You are separating their limitations from your inherent value. With this clarity comes the power to change how you engage with them, and, more importantly, how you engage with yourself. Empowerment in this context does not mean winning an argument, changing their mind, or finally getting them to understand your pain. It means choosing calm detachment. It means recognizing that you cannot control their behavior, but you have absolute control over your boundaries. Setting a boundary is not an act of aggression or punishment. It is a necessary act of self-respect. It might mean limiting contact, refusing to engage in circular, draining arguments, or simply choosing not to share vulnerable parts of your life with someone who has proven they cannot hold them safely. When you stop seeking their validation, you reclaim your energy. You begin to build a life where your worth is not up for debate. You learn to parent yourself with the empathy, consistency, and unconditional regard that you were denied. You become the source of your own stability. Healing from this kind of relational trauma is a quiet, steady process. It is not about dramatic breakthroughs, but about the daily, gentle choice to treat yourself with kindness. It is about allowing yourself to grieve the parent you needed but never had, without letting that grief define your future or dictate your present. You are actively breaking a generational cycle. The fact that you are seeking to understand this, that you are reflecting on these patterns with honesty, proves that you possess the empathy, depth, and self-awareness that was missing in your upbringing. You are already different. You are already healing. As you move forward, carry this truth with you. You are worthy of love exactly as you are. You do not need to earn it, perform for it, or shrink yourself to keep it. Your peace is yours to claim. You have survived the confusion, you have named the manipulation, and now you are free to build a life rooted in clarity, self-respect, and genuine, unconditional love. You are enough, and your journey forward is entirely your own.